Now that your husband is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. That's what my daughter-in-law said. At dinner. Over mashed potatoes. And my son, my only son, just smiled and nodded. The house was never really yours anyway. Noel's chair was still empty. His scent still clung to the linen napkins he insisted we use every Sunday. He'd been gone a week. Buried in the ground. 32 years of marriage, and the dirt was still fresh. I said nothing. Just stood up and walked out. Not a word. But the fire, oh, it sparked then. The next morning, I went to the bank. Not to cry. Not to beg. To begin. Let me take you back. The dining room, dim but polished, flickered under the chandelier. That mahogany table had held laughter, birthdays, spilled wine, secrets. Now, just tension. 3 people. 1 ghost. Romy, my daughter-in-law, picked at her food like it offended her. Pass the potatoes, Myrtle. Her voice sharp, clipped. Noel used to smooth those edges. Without him, she didn't bother hiding her disdain. Wade sat between us. Silent. The son I raised, the boy who once cried over scraped knees, who'd build Lego castles in the kitchen while I made stew. Now a man with lowered eyes, swallowing the betrayal he helped serve. I offered a lifeline. The service was beautiful, wasn't it? Your father would have loved seeing so many people there. Romy didn't even blink. Yes. Well, that's actually what we need to discuss with you, Myrtle. Something in her tone, ice, steel, finality. I already knew. Didn't want to know. She straightened. Wade didn't stop her. Now that Noel is gone, this house is going to be too much for you. Too much? This house was my spine, my blood. I knew every creak, every storm window that wouldn't shut, every squeaky board Noel swore he'd fix someday. I've managed fine, I said, voice trembling. But for how long? She countered. You're not getting any younger, and Wade, and I think it's time you moved somewhere more manageable. Wade mumbled, It makes sense, Mom. The upkeep alone. His voice trailed off, cowardly. This wasn't about maintenance. This was about erasure. They didn't want to help. They wanted the house. The home Noel and I built, brick by agonizing brick. I asked, You're suggesting I just leave? Romy's mask dropped. 2 weeks, Myrtle. That's generous. Find a senior community. Something with puzzles and water aerobics. 2 weeks to dismantle 3 decades. And then, like venom. The house was never really yours anyway. I turned to Wade. His face was unreadable. But his eyes told me everything. He agreed. He believed her. You were just living here, he said. That night, I sat alone in the bedroom I once shared with Noel. His glasses were still on the nightstand. His side of the bed still held his shape. And in the mirror, I saw someone else. Not a grieving widow. Not a helpless mother. But a woman reborn in betrayal. Romy thought I would vanish quietly. She forgot who I was before I became someone's wife. Before I sacrificed. Before I folded myself down into mother, hostess, ornament. Noel and I had a trust. A living one. He never told them. Never updated it. I held the deed. I owned the land. And the land, well, the land held secrets. Copper. Pure. Untapped. Noel found it 3 years ago. Never told Wade. Didn't trust him. He told me, though. He always told me. While Romy scouted senior homes, I hired a mineral rights lawyer. While Wade measured walls for a nursery, I filed transfer documents. While they planned my exit, I orchestrated theirs. 2 weeks later, movers arrived. Not for me. For them. A legal notice pinned to the front door. Eviction due to unauthorized occupancy. Owner, Myrtle Lane. Wade's face crumpled in disbelief. Romy's shriek cracked something in the air. You can't do this. I stepped onto the porch. Yes, I can. I handed them an envelope. Inside, a check. More than fair. Cold justice doesn't come without its price. But redemption? Redemption is priceless. Now I sit at the head of the table again. Alone. But not small. The mahogany gleams. Noel would have smiled at the polish. His chair is still empty. But I speak to him anyway. They thought I'd break love. But I remembered who I was. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked decades older than 71. Not because of the wrinkles, those were earned, but because of what had been taken. Grief had drained the color from my face, but betrayal had hollowed my eyes. In 2 weeks, I would be a guest in my own life, forced to pack 32 years into cardboard boxes and walk away. From the home I built, from the man I buried, from the son who told me I never really belonged. But as the sun dipped behind the trees that night, something shifted. Not peace, not even acceptance. Resolve. Noel always handled the finances. He said it spared me the stress. But he also taught me how to pay attention, to read between the lines. Now, the silence in the house wasn't just mourning. It was calculation. And the next morning, I began to listen. To the creaks in the floor. To the echoes in my memory. And to the voice in my spine that whispered, "Find out what they don't know you know." At the bank, the air smelled like toner and cold coffee. Helen Patterson, the branch manager, greeted me with widow's pity. "I'm so sorry about Noel. He was a gentleman." I smiled tight. "He always spoke fondly of you." Then I leaned forward, dropped the niceties. "I need to know what he left behind." She nodded and typed. Click, click, click. Then stopped. "Oh my," she said, eyebrows lifting. My pulse hammered. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong. Just unexpected." She turned the screen toward herself again. "There are several accounts. More than I'd assumed. First, the joint checking. Modest. Survivable. Then a savings account, larger. Comfortable for a while." I exhaled. Relief. Maybe I wouldn't be left penniless. But Helen kept frowning. "There are other accounts," she said. "Accounts in your name only." My name? 4 of them. 2 CDs. 1 money market. And she hesitated, a trust account. My throat tightened. "I don't understand. I never opened anything like that." Helen's voice softened. "Did your husband ever express concerns about family matters? Inheritance pressures?" The room went cold. I remembered how Noel would change the subject when Wade brought up money. How he'd roll his eyes when Romy talked about remodeling. How he'd always handle the banking alone. "He was protecting you," Helen said gently. "Sometimes, clients know their death will create a power shift. They prepare for it." She slid documents toward me. My signature, dated and witnessed. And suddenly I could remember being there. The time we updated our address. The day we added overdraft protection. The time he said, "Just sign here, love." Routine stuff. But it wasn't routine. It was armor. He knew. He knew they'd come for me. He knew Wade had already chosen Romy's ambition over his mother's dignity. He knew I'd be alone. And he planned for it. That trust account? Big enough to buy this house twice over. Noel had buried our safety beneath their greed. I left the bank that day with papers in my purse and fire in my chest. Not rage. Not yet. Strategy. Back home, Wade and Romy were in the hallway. Measuring. Laughing. As if I'd already vanished. As if I were the ghost haunting their inheritance. Romy waved at me. "Hey, Myrtle. Hope you're not packing anything we might need to keep for the house." She laughed at her own cruelty. Wade smiled. But I smiled back. Sweet. Quiet. Let them think I was defeated. That night, I spread out every document Noel left behind. Not just bank statements. Deeds. Titles. Insurance. And tucked in an envelope marked, "In case they come for her," I found the final key. The mineral rights. The land wasn't just sentimental. Noel had discovered copper. A deep vein running beneath our acreage. Quietly appraised. Legally secured. Worth millions over time. He never told Wade. Never trusted Romy. He left it all in my name. They wanted a house. They tried to force me out with cruelty disguised as practicality. But what they didn't know is that they weren't pushing me out. They were waking me up. The revenge came quietly. An attorney. A transfer of the trust. The mineral claim renewed. The eviction notice filed. 2 weeks later, Wade and Romy stood on the porch with their mouths open, staring at the notice on the door. Notice of termination of tenancy. Owner, Myrtle Henderson. They'd measured the walls for cribs. They'd sketched out paint swatches. They thought they were inheriting a future, but they forgot who built the past. You can't do this, Romy hissed. I stood tall. Noelle's ring cold on my finger. Oh, I already did. I handed Wade an envelope. A check. Generous. Merciful. But this wasn't about fairness. This was about truth. They left that day. No goodbye. No apologies. Just silence. Now I sit in the quiet of the home they tried to steal. The copper still sleeps beneath my feet. But I don't need to mine it. Not yet. Noelle's reading glasses still rest on the nightstand. I still talk to him every morning. They tried to erase me, love. But you wrote me back in. Was it justice? Maybe. Was it revenge? Not quite. This was a lesson. A reckoning. One they never saw coming. While Wade and Romy were measuring my kitchen for granite countertops. While they laughed in my hallway, treating my grief like clutter to be boxed. I was unraveling everything they didn't know existed. There's one more thing, Helen at the bank had said. And that one more thing was everything. The trust account had been receiving transfers for 5 years. Not just from savings, but from an active business account. Henderson Construction Trust. But Noelle sold the company, I said. That's what Wade told me. That's what Noelle told me. Helen shook her head slowly. The account is very much alive. And it's been depositing into your trust. Regularly. I left the bank in a daze. Statements and balance sheets like bricks in my purse. Proof that my late husband had fought a quiet war for me, while I was still trying to keep peace at the dinner table. In the parking lot of a rundown cafe. I sat in my car with the air off, sweat rolling down my back, reading the truth Noelle left behind. Every deposit matched a memory. Wade asking for money for a bridge loan. Romy hinting that their kitchen just wasn't functional anymore. The passive-aggressive Christmas cards. The silence that always followed the word inheritance. But Noelle hadn't just given. He'd matched every dollar with a quiet deposit into my name. Every time he helped them, he built a wall around me. Then my phone buzzed. Mom, Romy found a realtor. We can list the house next week. Hope you're making progress on finding a place. I stared at the message, then looked back at the documents, and laughed. A low, bitter sound. They had no idea what they'd triggered. No idea whose house they were trying to list. They were planting flags in land they didn't own. But I owned the battlefield. The next day, I drove to a quiet office tucked between a dry cleaner and a tax shop. Morrison and Associates. Noelle always said, "Don't bother, Myrtle. It's just boring paperwork." Now I understood, it was armor. Inside, a woman greeted me, Margaret Morrison. Steel gray bun. Kind eyes. Business sharp. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I'm sorry for your loss. Noelle was a good man." "I'm just trying to understand what he left behind," I said. "I was told the business was sold. But the bank says otherwise." Margaret blinked. "Sold?" "No, Mrs. Henderson. Henderson Construction wasn't sold. It was restructured." She turned to her screen, pulled up files. 5 years ago, Noelle transferred ownership into a trust, the Henderson Construction Trust. You're listed as the primary beneficiary. The trust owns the company. And you own the trust. The room tilted. I own the company? Yes. Your husband kept it lean. Steady contracts. Small jobs. Reliable money. Tom Bradley, your longtime foreman, he's been running operations day to day. Noelle focused on strategy. Oversight. He was still in control. She handed me pages, profit and loss statements. The numbers were undeniable. Revenue. Consistent. Profits. Significant. Noelle didn't retire. He shielded. He hid the truth in plain sight. He never told me, I whispered. Margaret's voice lowered. He worried. He said your son and daughter-in-law were under financial pressure. He feared they'd see your assets as their solution. So he took steps. Each word cut deeper. He hadn't kept me in the dark out of disrespect. He kept me in the dark. So no one else could steal my light. Every time Wade lied about the business being bankrupt. Every time Romy counted my cabinets like she already owned them. Noelle had been watching. Calculating. They thought they were scheming against a widow. But they never planned for the ghost of a man who saw this betrayal coming and left behind a loaded deck with my name on every card. Back at home, the air felt heavier. Wade was in the yard, talking loudly on the phone. Romy was photographing my bedroom. She was already planning where her vanity would go. I walked past them. They didn't even look up. They'd already erased me in their minds. Now it was my turn. That night, I sat in Noelle's old office, pulled out every folder, every notarized paper, and I began to move. I called the business accountant. I confirmed the titles. I initiated a freeze on any pending sale, filed legal documentation verifying my sole ownership of the property, the mineral rights, the company, everything. They wanted me gone, but I was everywhere. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table drinking my coffee. The same spot Romy once called a wasted nook. She was in the hallway, talking to the realtor. Wade walked in, excited. "Hey, Mom. We're thinking an open house next Thursday. Romy says it's a great week for traffic." I looked up from my coffee, smile soft as silk. "Actually, that won't work." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because I'm not leaving. And neither are you. You'll be receiving a cease and desist and a certified letter from my attorney." He blinked. "Excuse me. You're trespassing, Wade. This home, the land, the company, everything you thought you were taking. I own it. Noelle made sure of that. And I just made sure you can't touch a dime." Romy rushed in, still holding her phone. "You can't just." "Oh, but I can. And I have." I stood. The house quieted. Not with grief. Not with rage. But with truth. Let them measure walls. Let them dream. Let them walk through rooms they thought were already theirs. This is no longer a house. This is a graveyard of their ambition. They wanted a mother who would fade. A woman who would shrink. A widow they could push out with fake sympathy. What they got was the storm. And maybe someday, Wade will remember the smell of coffee in the morning. And maybe Romy will remember the way I smiled before I lit the match. And maybe neither of them will ever fully understand how they lost everything, without me even raising my voice. This wasn't just revenge. It was design. It was memory kept like a blade in the drawer. And it was mine. Wade had no idea the loans were recorded. No clue that every lie he whispered to his father now lived on paper with his signature. Every favor was a documented debt. Every manipulation a legal liability. $87,000. Owed. Accrued. Enforced. And now mine. Has Wade been making payments? I asked, already knowing the answer. Margaret shifted in her seat. There are significant arrears. Nearly $90,000 outstanding, Mrs. Henderson. The words hit like cold stone. Not because I was surprised, but because I was done pretending. He'd begged for money while standing in my kitchen, called it help, then turned around and called me a burden. The debt follows the business, Margaret said. And now the business belongs to you. You can collect, restructure, or forgive. I thought of Romy's voice, make sure the house is clean for the photographer. I thought of Wade measuring the windows, dreaming in square footage and illusion. And then I thought of Noelle, meticulous Noelle, writing down every number, stacking every paper, leaving behind a financial fortress camouflaged as clutter. There's something else, Margaret added. Her voice dropped lower. Last month, Wade called me, told me he'd be taking over the business now that his father passed. She studied me carefully. I told him I needed authorization from the trust beneficiary. From you. He seemed surprised you were involved at all. So, not content with my home, Wade was preparing to steal my livelihood too. He wanted everything, and counted on my silence to get it. Margaret, I said, my voice steady, if I wanted to keep Tom Bradley in charge of operations, would that be an issue? Her eyes lit with approval. Not at all. Tom's worried. He's been loyal. And if you offer him security, I have no doubt he'll return it tenfold. By the time I got back to the car, my hands weren't trembling anymore. They were sure. Purposeful. I opened a message from Romy. Myrtle, the realtor wants to schedule photography for tomorrow. Make sure the house is clean and decluttered. First impressions matter. I read it once. twice. Then deleted it. Let them send in the photographers. Let them imagine granite countertops and nursery colors. Let them stand in my house and pretend. Because tomorrow, the ground under their feet would shift. And nothing they built would survive it. The next morning, Tom Bradley sat in my kitchen. His hands calloused. Coffee untouched. His posture stiff with uncertainty. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "I'll be honest, I've been worried sick." Wade showed up at the job site last week asking for asset lists, future projections, even the keys to the equipment yard. "What did you tell him?" I asked. Tom looked me straight in the eyes. "I told him I wasn't giving anything to anyone until I heard from the actual owner. Mr. Noel said that if anything ever happened, I was to wait for your instruction. He never said anything about Wade." Relief spread through me like fire in dry grass. "Tom," I said, "I need your trust. And your discretion." "You have it, ma'am." I laid the documents out on the table. Ownership transfer. Profit reports. Trust beneficiary details. I own Henderson Construction. Not Wade. Not the estate. Me. Tom blinked at the paperwork. His jaw dropped. Then slowly he smiled. "Well, I'll be, pardon me, ma'am. Mr. Noel was always 3 steps ahead." "Yes, he was." "And Tom," I added, my voice low, measured, final. "You've done good work. The company's profitable, reliable, clean. So here's what I want. Nothing changes. You keep running operations. You report to me." Wade doesn't get so much as a phone call answered. He nodded, proud now, eyes shining with something more than respect. Something like loyalty. "Yes, ma'am." As he left, he paused at the door. Mr. Noel told me once, when Wade left the job site early, said he was too tired to shovel gravel. Noel looked at me and said, he thinks he's too smart to work, too important to wait, and too entitled to earn. I never forgot that. "Neither did I said. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. Wade. No warning. No appointment. Just the stale scent of entitlement and panic. He stepped in with a realtor's folder under his arm. "Mom, I've got some documents for the house transfer. If we don't move quickly, we'll miss the summer buyers." "I'm not signing anything." He paused. "What?" "I'm not signing anything. Because this house isn't yours to sell." "Mom, come on. This is what Dad would have wanted." "No. What your father wanted is exactly what I'm doing." I handed him the first folder. Legal notice. The deed. Trust records. Ownership rights. Loan statements. $87,000 highlighted. He flipped through it in stunned silence. Then looked up. "You can't do this to me." I met his eyes. "You already did it to me. This is just the part where I stop letting it happen. No screaming. No crying. Just truth. Cut clean as glass." As Wade stumbled out, Romy followed him to the car, her phone still clutched in one manicured hand. "You'll regret this," she shouted. I closed the door softly behind her. Not with fear. Not with regret. But with peace. In the silence that followed, I sat at Noel's desk again. The chair still held his shape. The air still faintly smelled like his cologne and cedar dust. He saw this coming. He built the walls. I just had to step into the fortress he left behind. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Wade and Romy thought they'd buried me alongside my husband. But all they did was loosen the earth. Now I've risen from it. Document in hand. Memory like steel. And not a single thing to apologize for. Actually, Wade, I think Tom is asking the right questions. The kitchen fell so still you could hear the breath leave Wade's body. He blinked. Twice. "What?" His voice thinned. "Mom, this isn't the time for clarity." I cut in. "No, Wade. This is exactly the time for it." Tom didn't move. His arms were crossed, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. Watching. Waiting. Wade shifted on his feet. His confident stance faltered, ever so slightly. "Mom," he said, now slower, lower. "This is Dad's business. This is family business." I walked to the table, placed the folder down between us with a soft, final thud. "You're right. And that's exactly why you should have respected it." He opened the folder. Deed. Trust documentation. Ownership transfer. Loan records. $93,000 highlighted in bold. He scanned it. Flipped through pages. Slower now. No longer confident. Just stunned. This isn't real. It's real, I said. Real enough that you've been asking a man you thought was powerless for favors, when all this time you were borrowing from me. His hand hovered over the paperwork like it might burn him. This was supposed to be. Dad said the business was done. That it barely paid the bills. Because that's what he wanted you to believe. Because he knew who you were becoming. He looked at me, truly looked, for the first time in years. Something flickered behind his eyes. Regret? No. Just recognition. He'd underestimated me. And Noelle. And Tom. And now the whole game was flipped. You're telling me, Wade said, the edges of his voice fraying, that you own the business? I nodded once. Steady. Final. I own Henderson Construction. I hold the debt you ran up. I control the accounts. You came in here measuring floors and talking about liquidation. You thought the house and the business were yours to divide. But you don't own a single nail. Tom didn't smirk. Didn't gloat. He just stood taller, like something had been set right in the world. Wade's hands curled at his sides. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? I asked. Take advantage of a grieving widow? Bury your father and then evict your mother before the dirt even settled. I was just trying to provide for my family, he muttered. And I was your family, I said. Once. Silence. Just the slow tick of the clock above the sink. Noelle's clock. The last thing he'd fixed before he died. Wade turned to Tom, voice tighter now. You said you'd help with the inventory. I said I'd help whoever had the legal authority. And that's not you, Wade. I almost felt sorry for him in that moment. Almost. But then I remembered his smile as Romy told me to pack my bags. I remembered his silence when I looked at him for mercy. And I remembered the way he nodded. The way he nodded. You should go, I said. Take your folder. Take your plans. And go. Wade didn't move at first. Then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, he gathered the papers and walked out. He didn't slam the door. Didn't say goodbye. Just faded down the steps, the sound of his tires crunching the gravel fading until all that was left was the low hum of silence. Tom exhaled. Ma'am, that was something. No, I said, that was long overdue. That night, I stood in the doorway of the study. The smell of cedar and dust still clung to the old wood shelves. I ran my hand across the spine of Noelle's ledgers. Every figure. Every detail. His quiet way of saying, you won't be left behind. I wasn't angry anymore. I was aware. Awake. Free. Let them list the house. Let them clean the kitchen. Let them think they've lost an inheritance. They never had one to begin with. They had assumptions. Entitlement. And a plan based on my silence. But the silence is broken. I am not the forgotten widow in the corner. I am the storm they thought was weathered. And I'm just getting started. Because he was protecting me, Wade, I said, letting it land like the truth. It was brutal, heavy, and earned. He saw what was coming. Even if I didn't. Wade stared at me, pale, blinking as if trying to reverse time with his eyes. Romy, still clutching the loan documents, now looked like a woman who'd realized her hand was empty at a high-stakes table. Protecting you from us? Wade asked. The word hung there. Us. He'd said it without thinking, but it was true. And he knew it. You lied to me, Romy hissed at him, rounding on her husband. You told me the house was ours. You told me the business was dead. He flinched. Just slightly. The smallest crack in the polished marble of his composure. I didn't know, he muttered. I didn't know. No, Wade, I said. You didn't care to know. You didn't want to know. You wanted to inherit a kingdom without ever lifting a stone. I stood. Slowly. No raised voice. No theatrics. Just the kind of silence that comes after thunder and before the rain. This house? You're right, Romy. It is lovely. But it's not your future. I walked to the sideboard. Opened a drawer. Pulled out the envelope I'd sealed the night before. Here's what's going to happen, I said, placing it on the table between us like a verdict. That's a payment demand. $93,000, itemized. I've decided to enforce the loans. Wade didn't speak. His face was frozen, colorless. If you cannot repay, I continued, the business has the right to seize assets. And that includes any holdings you've placed under the name of Henderson Construction subsidiaries. I've already consulted counsel. Romy was breathing hard now. She looked at the envelope as if it might explode. You're taking us to court, she asked, her voice trembling. Only if you make me, I said. You made your plans while I was still mourning. You tried to gut this home while it still held my grief. You disrespected the man who built all this, and you tried to erase the woman he protected. Wade rubbed his hands over his face. He looked aged now, older than Noel had ever seemed. Exhausted by the weight of a truth he couldn't ignore. I thought Dad always said family came first. He did put family first, I said, my voice tight. You just didn't realize that meant me. Romy stood suddenly, knocking over her purse. Coins and receipts spilled like cluttered regrets. This is war, she spat. You think you've won something here? You think this makes you righteous? No, I replied. It doesn't make me righteous. Just ready. They left without another word. No apologies. No tears. Just the sound of their car speeding down the driveway like they were escaping a fire. But the fire was still here. Burning steady. Controlled. I stood in the doorway long after the dust had settled. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just clear. In the days that followed, I met with Margaret again. Sat down with Tom to review long-term business planning. We filed lien notices. Had a quiet conversation with the family attorney. Quiet, but irreversible. One afternoon, the mail arrived with a card. No return address. Just my name in Wade's familiar handwriting. Inside, a single note. You win. I stared at it for a long time before tucking it away in Noel's ledger. Between the page where he listed every loan to Wade and the note he wrote in the margin next to the last one. Don't let him take her down with him. I didn't win. This wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. It was about seeing what they did to me, what they would have done, and choosing not to be erased. They will never understand the silence it took to protect them. They will never know what it cost to stay kind for so long. But now they know what happens when I stop. The business could legally seize any remaining assets tied to their names, James finished, passing the signed settlement across the table. I took it with steady hands. Not triumphant. Not gloating. Just certain. Wade had called it a betrayal. Romy had called it manipulation. But I called it survival. And now freedom. Outside, the ocean whispered its morning lullaby. Foam curling across black rock like breath on a mirror. I remembered the old sounds of the farmhouse, the groaning floorboards, the wind whining through cracks in the siding, and I didn't miss them. Noel had bought this cottage for me long before the confrontation ever came. A silent plan. One last gesture of love from a man who had seen the storm coming before I did. Who had known, somehow, that his son would see a mother as an obstacle, not a legacy. They won't be happy, James said, sipping his coffee. I'm not here to make them happy, I replied. I'm here to finish what Noel started. He nodded, then stood, gathering his briefcase. I'll file the paperwork with the court this afternoon. You're free and clear, Myrtle. It's over. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine and stood barefoot on the deck, staring at the waves. I thought about Wade. About how he'd stood in my kitchen, full of certainty, and watched it all slip away. I thought about Romy, clinging to imagined entitlements like pearls on a breaking string. And I thought about the part of me that still wanted to forgive them, some faded instinct that pulsed like a phantom limb. But I didn't. Instead, I wrote a check for the exact amount of the first payment they owed, then tore it in half and dropped it into the fire. Ash and ink curling together in the wind. A ceremonial refusal. Because forgiveness without remorse is just surrender. Tom Bradley called just before sunset. The Civic Center renovations ahead of schedule, he said, his voice warmed by pride. We'll clear another 10 grand profit by month's end. You've built something real, Tom, I told him. Your loyalty, Noel was right to trust you. There was a pause. Then, we all did, Mrs. Henderson. And we still do. After the call, I pulled out Noelle's final note written in faded ink, found folded behind an old picture frame. If they ever turn on you, Murdy, don't flinch. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for. Let them underestimate you. That's where your power is. He knew me better than I knew myself. Some nights I still walk through the house barefoot, listening to the silence. No arguments. No whispered betrayals. Just wood and stone and sea. And some mornings I get a letter. A pleading note from Wade. A carefully worded apology from Romy, more about appearances than remorse. I don't reply. Let them live in the wreckage they built. Let the silence teach them what I never could. This wasn't revenge. This was a reckoning. This was a mother standing in the rubble and choosing not to rebuild what had rotted. But even now, I sometimes wonder, what would they have done if Noelle hadn't protected me? What if I'd lost the house? What if I had no ledger, no legal counsel, no Tom Bradley with his careful notebook? Would I have been just another discarded widow, nodding politely while they auctioned off my life? No, that's not who I am anymore. I am the storm they never saw coming. I am the ledger they didn't bother to read. I am the woman who outlived their schemes and made them pay for every nail they pulled from the walls of her sanctuary. And I'm just getting started. He was my son. And he would have sold me out for drywall and a granite countertop. That's the moment it broke. Not when they measured my kitchen. Not when Romy sent the realtor. But when I saw my son's signature on the loan papers, debt piling like dust while he plotted to evict me from my own home. He didn't just forget me. He erased me. But Noelle didn't. He'd seen what I hadn't. Quietly, precisely, he'd built walls around me. A trust. A business. A plan that would detonate under the weight of their arrogance. They thought I was grieving. And I was. But grief sharpens, not softens. It focuses. It fuels. I had a house full of documents, a loyal foreman in Tom, and a legal hammer waiting in the wings. I didn't need vengeance. I needed truth. Truth with teeth. Wade and Romy tried to wrestle the business from Tom. They assumed the title son was all the paperwork they needed. But Noelle had given me more than a marriage. He'd handed me ownership. And when they found that out, the silence in the room was pure oxygen. I watched them choke on it. They contested the trust. Hired lawyers. Accused me of manipulation. I didn't flinch. Every dotted line had Noelle's signature. Every decision he'd made was deliberate. Protecting me from them, from this exact betrayal. Wade owed the business nearly $100,000. Not gifts, loans. Interest. Missed payments. Romy's face went gray when she read it. Their house of cards folded in slow motion, and I didn't lift a finger. When the settlement came through, it was ironclad. 8 years of repayments. Garnished wages. Lien rights on future property. Justice, slow and silent, like an incoming tide. You don't hear it coming until your feet are already underwater. And then came the letter. Wade, trying to apologize. Saying he understood now. That he and Romy were in counseling. That maybe I'd forgive him someday. I read it twice. Then folded it away. If he wants forgiveness, he'll earn it 1 month at a time. The same way he spent years treating me like a placeholder. Now I live in the cottage Noelle bought in secret. A retreat by the sea, his final gift. Ocean air. A place of my own. The house is quiet except for the waves and the wind. No one here calls me a burden. No one here plans around my exit. I tend to my tomatoes. I take lunch in town. I speak to women who've lived the same story, who are still halfway through the betrayal. I tell them what I learned. Love your family. But never confuse love with trust. Understand your accounts. Own your name. Know what's yours. And never, ever let anyone decide your worth for you. I raise a glass to Noelle every evening at sunset. He's not here to see it, but I hope he knows. He didn't just save me. He taught me to save myself. And for the first time in my life, I don't belong to anyone else's plan. I belong to myself.